Hello everybody and welcome to our exclusive keynote panel discussion on the modern firefighter. In this panel discussion, we will aim to analyse and discuss some of the biggest trends and challenges currently facing firefighters around the world, including wildfires, the built environment, technology evolution and training. I'm joined here by some truly phenomenal firefighting experts from the US, Canada and Australia. First, I'll come to you, Brent, as the Fire by Live regular contributor. Could you please just introduce yourself and give us a little insight into your background?
Yes, Brent Brooks, Canadian firefighter. I got 31 years as a firefighter. I've been 29 years with Toronto, 16 years on a dedicated high-rise unit, and I run the high-rise program and our ATI program and R&D for high-rise. I'm also a member of the Council of Tall Buildings, which is actually based out of Chicago, and a member of the T70 group, which is a tall safety building conference out of London, England.
Thank you, Brent. It's always a pleasure to have you speak with us. And next up, we have Gerard Mann from Melbourne. Gerard, could you also give us a little overview into who you are?
G'day, Rebecca. I'm Gerard Mann. I work as a leading firefighter in Melbourne, Australia. I've been in the Australian emergency services sector for the past 14 years, and I'm just shy of 12 years as a career firefighter, mainly in large regional centres in Victoria and Melbourne itself. For the past 4 years, I've stepped into instructing, speaking about fire dynamics, firefighting itself. I've helped our planning policy and operational guidance directorate develop new policy for our new and emerging organisation. And I've also been lucky enough to participate in training and deliver training nationally and internationally, and that's been very eye-opening for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Gerard. I really appreciate your time and the classic entrance of good day. Next up, we have Jimmy Davis from Chicago Fire Department.
Hi, Rebecca. Thanks for having us on today. Quite the pleasure to be with you and share some good information. I'm a captain over at Engine 43, 29 years on Chicago Fire Department. That time goes by very, very quick. Enjoying every minute of it. I also instruct high-rise, mid-rise, standpipe operations for the Chicago Fire Department, and also have a very big hand in delivering the company officer programs. Those are people that are being promoted. So I stay very active within the department, educating them, encouraging them, and inspiring them to reach their full potential. So thank you again, Rebecca, and everybody on this panel for having me.
Thank you, Jamie. And lastly, we have Lyndon and Geoff. Please take it away, guys, from Canada.
Sure, thanks for the invite. I'm a firefighter in a large Canadian fire department. I've been here frontline service for about 15 years. In my current role, I develop specifications for most of the things that we buy, including hose and nozzles, tools, and apparatus. And I've been an instructor in multiple disciplines and enjoy studying and learning all about the fire service.
And Geoff?
Yeah, thanks for the invite. Happy to be here. I'm a company officer. Lyndon and I work together in the same organization in Western Canada. I'm a member of the technical rescue team and the chair of our high-rise committee here. I recently returned to operations after a couple of years of the training academy, where I focus on incumbent training and some program development for leadership and officer development.
Well, thank you all for being here on this panel. Collectively, you all bring a wealth of experience and knowledge that can really help better the firefighting world. And I'm a huge advocate for communication and learning from each other across departments. And this is what the panel aims to do, to help impart your knowledge to our audience and to help bring your skills and perspective to their lives. So thank you. There are several key areas and themes that I would like to cover in this panel, including the high-rise built environment, the climate crisis that has caused obviously the increased spread of wildfires, and the increase in electric vehicles and the unique challenges that this poses for fire departments globally. Firstly, our main topic is the high-rise buildings. So as urbanization continues to increase at an exponential level, buildings are increasing in size and particularly height, which brings a whole magnitude of challenges to fire departments worldwide. Brent, I come to you first again as one of the high-rise specialists. From your experience, how has this increasing complexity of high-rise structures impacted the firefighting strategies and tactics?
It definitely has. If you look at today's modern buildings, they're podium-based high-rise buildings. So it's a large building with sometimes 1 to 4 towers on top of them. And traditionally, as firefighters, we look at a residential building or we look at a commercial high-rise building, and we have tactics differently for each of those buildings. But now our buildings are mixed use. We've also added assembly type high-rise. We've added institutional type high-rise. We have a high-rise as nursing homes, detention centers, bars, spas, medical offices, financial institutions, all within these buildings. So there's cities within cities. So you can go to high school, you can go to work and live in that same building that you're living in. So our tactics, 1960, 1970 tactics are still being used today because we're thinking residential, we're thinking commercial, two different animals. But now that they're all combined into one, our tactics have to change. So in doing that, in our city, anyways, we've played to catch up. We are prepared for the mixed use high-rise environment.
And given the challenges that you've just said there in high-rise environments, can you share any innovative approaches or equipment that you've incorporated to ensure effective rescue operations?
So what we did when we designed our high-rise truck is we took the 12 problem areas in high-rise firefighting, and that's our vertical response time. It's our application of agent time. We looked at fallen debris, communications, premise security, the complexity of the layout of today's building, water supply, the physical demand on firefighters, failure of the electrical systems, evacuation, fire and smoke spread, effects of wind, and also the catastrophic failure of these building systems. So I know there's a long list there, but we have a plan A, we have a plan B and C for all 12 of those problems. And plus we have the equipment to go along with it. So when we respond to these high-rise fires now, they're almost predictable because we know how they've been designed, we know how they've been built, we know how smoke is going to spread, we know how the fire is going to auto-expose, we know the science there. So what we have to do is get the equipment in, staged, and get ready for that next phase of firefighting. So we're certainly getting better at it, but equipment has to change. It has to be lighter to make us faster to get inside. But firefighters have to understand these buildings. Designers, architects, and engineers have to share that information with us so we can grow together. We have been using stair climbers. It's to lift a 300-pound portable calf system. So that is unique in itself. A lot of fire departments wouldn't have something like that. So the future's looking bright where we can use drones and robotics and stair climbers to get that heavy equipment up because our buildings are becoming taller and taller, and we're only human. We have physical limit. We're limited to our physical fitness, but if you look at our protective firefighting gear, it makes us hot. It's very hard to move in it. So for us to, walk up 80 stories in shorts and t-shirt, it might be easy, but as soon as you add firefighting gear on, it slows that whole process. We become overheated, and if we do get up there, we're not going to be useful. So these technologies, we need them to help us do our job.
And Jimmy, you also focus on high-rise firefighting training in your role with Chicago Fire Department. So what is your view on the changing strategies and tactics involved in high-rise structures from a training perspective?
Well, I want to tell you what, I think Brent and Mann, he really covered quite a bit. And, you really got a really good description of what modern high-rise firefighting is, and generally any type of high-rise fire, to be exact. But when we talk about strategy and tactics, and I'm going to go back to the Chicago end of things, I think everything that we do is kind of in line. The reason why we're in line with that is because of the experience, the case studies, and the lessons learned that are being applied or continuing to tweak or be proactive when it comes to high-rise firefighting. And that's a stance we want to take, and that's a message that I want to convey to everybody, is that it's a living document. If you have a policy and procedure, it should be reviewed quite frequently. And if you had some type of significant fire, it's a great opportunity to go back and tweak your SOPs to meet these demands. Everything looks good on paper, but the execution of it is the really hard part, the difficult part of things. And that's where that training comes in too. Training will dictate outcomes. Training is also the nucleus of any high-rise response. It's a dynamic, continuous process, which again is going to determine good or bad outcomes. Your performance through training will manifest itself in a real fire. So this is something, again, to recap and convey this very important message, is that you have to continually identify threats, identify the problem clusters, which Brett had related to, is that you have to go deep into your playbook with a plan B, a C, and sometimes a plan D. And again, the only way to get to that is department buy-in, but also provide that training. And that's what we're doing here in Chicago.
Well, thank you, Jimmy. And in addition, Gerard, when it comes to fire dynamics, I know obviously that's a topic that you're quite well versed in, but fire dynamics in the context of a high-rise emergency, what do you believe is the most significant factor that can compromise the safety of both firefighters and occupants?
I think fire departments and fire brigades need to realise that large and complex buildings have large and complex fire dynamics. Most fire dynamics programs taught by fire departments and fire brigades around the world focus on single compartment burns in an area that's about 100 by 100 metres squared. Can't convert that to old money. Can anyone who speaks imperial? No one. All right. But yeah, about 100 metres squared is the compartment size that we mainly focus most of our teachings around compartment firefighting or structural firefighting. Large and complex buildings have large and complex systems, and they also have large space, large volume. We're seeing a lot of research into travelling fire theories or progressive fire theory, which is showing that the fire's burning differently. Now, if the fire's going to burn differently, we've got to think differently about how we approach that fire, how we're going to apply water to that large space, and how we're going to limit the spread of that fire to be as small as possible in these vertical communities. The buildings themselves have quite complex systems around smoke and air handling that we need to take into consideration. They're going to affect fire growth and fire spread as well as smoke spread. And the operational realities of individual departments. I mean, in Melbourne, in the city I work in, we're quite lucky, we're quite fortunate. We have a lot of resources. We can have about 300 firefighters in our central business district in under 20 minutes. We'd probably be able to muster that. But most fire brigades and fire departments don't have that resourcing or that ability to do it. And the equipment's another big thing. And I know Brent and Jimmy have both been instrumental in implementing new equipment into their respective departments. I think in the modern era, if fire brigades and departments aren't looking at specialist equipment such as floor below nozzles, larger hose diameters to be able to deliver larger volumes of water or bigger flow rate density, I think that they're not really understanding the complexities of the problem offered by this environment. So I think that's something that we really need to focus on. Yeah, thank you.
And just to hover quickly, you spoke about fire spreading differently. Do you think that with the different materials used in construction now, that's also adding difficulties and challenges when it comes to analysing fire dynamics?
Yeah, it's not only the construction materials, it's also the fire dynamics that the materials will be assaulted by. So you take wind-driven fires, for example. Oxygen content derives heat release rate of a fire. So in a wind-driven fire, you have a forced flow, which means you're going to have increased oxygen moving into a space, which means you're going to have an increased heat release rate. Now, most of these high-rise buildings will have some form of compartmentation designed in their engineering process to be able to limit the fire spread to a single compartment or a single floor. That rating is based upon ASTME 19, which is like a standard that engineers use in North America to go, yep, cool, that fire door is going to rated to that temperature. But we're going to have these things be assaulted by higher temperatures, so the time to failure is going to be quicker. So it's not just about understanding that compartmentation is going to hold this fire. It's understanding that if I've got a windy day with a fire in it, my compartmentation is probably not going to hold up as well as it should. So now I might need to employ something like a smoke blocker or a smoke curtain. to increase the life of that door or to increase the compartmentation of that space. So yeah, it's understanding the built environment, but also how the built environment reacts to the differing fire dynamics that you're going to get in this scenario. Cladding's another great example, ACP. We've seen it all around the world. We'll extend fires vertically on the exterior of the building. And if you've got sprinklers and you can boost those sprinklers, you should be able to hold it to the exterior of the building. But yeah, we have to start thinking outside how we're doing things when we fight these different types of fires.
It's definitely a complicated and multifaceted topic that I'm sure we could get into the real nitty-gritty depths of it and talk for hours. But thank you all for your insights in the high-rise structure fires topic. One of the other core topics that has been kind of non-stop in the news throughout the world is the rise of wildfires. With temperatures hitting unprecedented heights, wildfires are no longer typically just, a peak seasonal challenge, but a year-long battle. And Canada in particular has been in the news quite recently with wildfires plaguing the cities, mass evacuations, hectares of land being destroyed, etc. Lyndon, Geoff, you both play crucial roles in your fire department in Canada. As the frequency and intensity of wildfires have increased in recent years, how is the role of a firefighter involved in these scenarios? Lyndon, perhaps you would like to start first.
Sure, thanks. I think I'll speak from the perspective of a municipal firefighter, because that's the experience we have. So we've had to adapt our equipment. We've adopted a system much closer to what wildland firefighters use. So getting the proper hose and nozzle packages to be smaller and more agile apparatus with the ability to move smaller quantities of water, but over much greater distances than is typical in a structural firefight. For hand tools, we've tried to focus on tried and true tools such as Pulaski's and McLeod's, etc., just because they're effective, reliable, and they're simple to use. From a training perspective, wildfire is a different beast than structural fire. It requires a significant amount of training, with wildland firefighters dedicating entire careers to it. For a municipal firefighter, we're stretched thin. We have structural fire, medical, hazmat, motor vehicle collisions, technical rescue, and on and on. So each of these takes a significant amount of training to become proficient, and regular ongoing training to stay proficient and to keep up on the latest developments. Maintaining our wildland urban interface training and knowledge at a high level is a challenge, but it has the potential to be one of the highest risk activities we do, both in terms of damage potential and risk to firefighters. So to talk about the mindset of a firefighter, for municipal firefighters, we focus on stopping the incident immediately. In a wildland firefighter, it's different. It's more about reducing the effects of the fire on the community and the fire's path. And that requires a different approach. We must be willing to let some non-defensible areas and structures go while safely protecting what can be protected. We're used to wins as municipal firefighters. We mostly keep the fire somewhat contained to where it started, as we generally show up with the tools and resources to extinguish the fire very quickly. But in wildland, it's about managing expectations.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Continue. No, please continue.
Sure. Historically, we haven't spent a great deal of time on wildland firefighting for training. When a large event happens, we scramble to respond, often with inadequate training and equipment and other resources. But we've seen a great improvement in recent years in these areas, especially when it comes to structure protection. Often it's as simple as calling for more resources early, which allows us the time to build a system of protection ahead of the advancing fire, while the dedicated wildland firefighters respond with their resources. We still lose property, and as long as we continue to build our homes and communities where fires occur, we likely always will to some degree, but I think we're losing a lot less property than we would even just a few years ago.
Well, thank you. And Geoff, anything to add?
Yeah, sure. So Lyndon and I being in the same department, the area that we serve is just surrounded and inundated with thousands of acres of wildland. We have a significant risk here for the urban interface type fires. And as you mentioned, the frequency and intensity of events has increased over the last few years. And so we've been routinely asked to deploy our resources from a municipal side to remote areas of the province and even neighboring provinces. we have a solid system for managing structure fires, but it isn't always well adapted to that wildland or the interface type fire. As Lyndon mentioned, we've identified some gaps and been purchasing new equipment, providing enhanced training. None of this progress would have been possible if we didn't recognize the hazard and prioritize the necessary and required change. For years, we didn't appreciate the risk of the changing climate and urbanization pushing further and further into that wildland. The crazy fires that you see on TV and the news, the mindset was that it couldn't happen here. But all that changed in 2016. We had a huge wildfire swept through a town up north in Alberta, Fort McMurray. It went right through town, destroyed thousands of buildings, and forced the evacuation of around 100,000 people. And it was obvious then that this could happen here. Since then, the growth and development in our strategies and our tactics and the equipment for these events has become a real priority for us. It's quite challenging in this interface environment to modify an urban department focused strictly on structural firefighting to that wildland, and vice versa for wildland firefighters. When we're often working together doing mutual aid type things, we find them inside structures and we find ourselves out in the middle of the forest, not really sure what each other's supposed to be doing. We need to strike that right balance where an urban firefighter can safely and effectively operate in the wildland when required. So for us, we found some success by really identifying who we are and sticking to our core. That is being structural firefighters. And we take what we do in that environment and what works well, and we'll adapt it to the wildland. This meant not reinventing the wheel. When we have a term or procedure from structural firefighting that was applicable to the wildland, we kept it. We would only introduce new things when something existing didn't work or was contraindicated. And in those cases, we would borrow from professional wildland firefighters, in our case, the Alberta wildfire. We issue our firefighters a wildland kit. Contains coveralls, goggles, helmets. We recently added a P100 half mask for some respiratory protection. And then starting this year during the wildfire season, we have TVs up in all the stations. And so we post information up there for firefighters and fire officers that describe the current conditions outside. So a bit of a predictor about how likely a fire is to start, and if it did start, what its behavior would be like based on, temperature and how dry the conditions are outside. As we talked about, the protocols for a structure fire don't always easily adapt to the wildland. So this information helps support firefighters and fire officers in their decision making, and hopefully prompts them to ask for resources early and often, because that structure fire response doesn't, like I mentioned, always overlay to that wildland environment.
And it's interesting that despite obviously the different strategies involved in both wildland and structural fires, that actually a lot of the challenges and the demands are the same in terms of you need more lightweight, more flexible equipment, and the communication between departments and the training. All of those kind of stay very much apparent between different applications. And Geoff, just quickly, what measures can communities adopt to enhance their resilience against the growing threat of wildfires?
Yeah, I think the first thing you can do is recognize that this can happen to you. It can happen where you live, and it can happen to your property. So communities can be proactive by enacting better building codes and promoting awareness to their citizens. Better building codes would promote construction methods and materials that are better suited to the threats of a wildfire. Things like non-combustible siding and roofing materials, to maybe some longer setbacks and spacing between occupancies would all help. In our neck of the woods, we have a program called Fire Smart. It's put on by the government, and it's often adopted by your local jurisdiction, and they'll provide that service to its citizens often for free. So that'll give you kind of a report about things that you could do around your property to lessen the threat of a wildfire. And there's often simple things that you can just do on your own. It doesn't cost much money, and it's just about a maintenance issue. So you can enhance your resilience by keeping the gutters in your yard free of debris, especially right up against your house. That for built up material is all fuel. Choosing landscaping options that are non-combustible, keeping your trees, grass, and shrubs, all that stuff trimmed and green. Planning a reno on the outside, choose non-combustible building products where possible. These are all things that are easy to do.
And Gerard as well, Australia is also sadly something that's also too familiar with wildfires. Can you discuss any cross-border collaborations or best practices from international counterparts that have been particularly effective in wildfire management?
So I'll just echo what the two boys said before me. It's a very interesting space to move into as a municipal firefighter, moving into a wildland, and especially the wildland urban interface and the risk that comes from that. some things we've found through our own experiences here and through sharing and collaborating with departments in California and departments in Canada, we have kind of a mutual aid thing every summer. So this summer, I know some people from my brigade have been over to Canada to help out with incident management teams and that kind of stuff. Is about prioritizing what we're going to protect first and if it's protectable. So having a structure to triage what we can protect. As municipal firefighters, we're used to having more fire trucks than we have buildings on fire. In the wildland urban interface, it's the other way around. You usually have more buildings under threat than you have fire trucks. So it's important to have a very robust system to be able to make quick decisions around incident control on what we're going to protect. And the first thing you need to protect is utilities. And so, you know, water, food, hospitals, all those type of things, because they're going to be able to help have a resilient community after the event. Then we need to protect, well, first of all, life, and then back into the property things. Next up, we need to protect large places of business or large employers or ways to boost the economy post-event. Then it comes into personal property, then holiday homes, then the environment or areas of cultural significance. The other problem with this is you also have to triage it against the defendability of that structure. So you could have a utility that we need to defend, but it has been overgrown, maintenance hasn't been very well on it. You're not going to defend it. There's no point in putting resources on it when you could go protect other things. The big thing with wildland urban interface firefighting that we found is that pre-season preparation is paramount. So the communities need to be engaged. They need to be protecting their properties or keeping their properties well maintained to prevent the risk of fires, as well as maintenance companies, councils, all those type of things, to be able to keep the growth around the town down so that when a fire front does inevitably come through, the impact of that fire front is lessened quite significantly. Yeah.
Thank you. And Lyndon, just hopping back to you quickly as well. Given the unpredictable nature of wildfires, how do you prioritize and strategize kind of resource allocation during an active event?
Sure. It really depends on the size of the event. For smaller routine fires, we rely on our standard dispatch system and the resources on a first or a second alarm to handle that incident. When the fire gets beyond the capabilities of the agency initially dispatched, we begin to call in more help. At a certain point, it becomes a provincial emergency and the province steps in and provides a higher level of incident management and resource allocation. When this happens, being a municipal firefighter, we're generally tasked with structure protection. Often we'll work together with various agencies and depending on their capabilities within the incident management system. They'll be assigned tasks and tasks based on those capabilities. The true wildland firefighting will be done by provincial agencies and contractors and resources called in from other jurisdictions, often by mutual aid municipalities and sometimes other provinces and even from out of the country, like Gerard said. The structure protection itself is often done by municipalities, though.
Thank you. And just moving on to our final topic, when it comes to the built environment, it's not just the mountain of floors that poses an issue that we've discussed earlier, but also the multi-story car parks that are part and parcel of large buildings. Brent, what distinctive challenges do electric vehicles or EVs pose in fire scenarios, especially in confined spaces like car parks?
Yeah, when we talk EV car fires, right now it is a world problem, but right now we are unable to put these fires out. Our priority is to protect the surroundings and basically let this car burn. However, when we put that car in an underground parking lot, things change because now we have that toxic smoke, the gas is being produced in a large open area that is underneath the building, several stories in some cases, and we have to search those areas. Cell phone service is horrible in underground parking, so we have to actually get boots on the ground firefighters down there and start searching. But we also have to try and prevent that car from catching other cars on fire. and becoming a structural problem to those underground parkings. So right now, what we have planned is we're going to go down in the underground. We're going to try to use a resin distributor, which puts out 2,000 liters of water. We're going to put that inside the car. Now, we know we can't put the car up, but what that does is in about 40 seconds, puts 2,000 liters of water inside the car. So we're actually making a bathtub out of the car. That fire that's burning underneath the car has about 2 feet of water to actually burn through. So we want to stop the smokes, slow down those toxic gases by putting basically a bathtub on top of it. Then we're also going to use another resin distributor beside the car to protect other cars. Now, the problem with this is, how do you keep firefighters down there on air? How do you maintain that water supply for 72 hours or sometimes days? With the resin distributor, because it has no nozzle reaction, it puts out a high amount of volume of water. We can actually control that remotely with a gate and gate. So once we get those nozzles flowing, we can control them remotely and basically wait this fire out. But we do have to send crews down to search. So this is a worldwide problem that we have to share this information and try and find a solution. So right now, this is a band-aid to the problem, but we don't know of any other choice at this time. Thank you.
And just out of curiosity, sorry, have you seen that? I believe it's Fire Industry Association have been running some case studies, some tests of using a particular type of nozzles with water mist technology to put out specific cells within a battery of an electric vehicle to mitigate propagation and all of that as well. I don't know whether that type of equipment or seeing more of that is something that can try and help turn the Band-Aid, I suppose, into a solution.
Yeah, we've seen that type of technology in blankets, and we've talked about trying to remove the car from the underground parking lot. But people have to realize is that those cars weigh 3 times more than what an average car weighs, and you're in zero visibility, you're in PPE, and firefighters have to work together. It's very hard. Even our Band-Aid solution right now to actually get those into play in those type of heat and smoke conditions and maintain your crew together. So we've seen those things. We just simply don't know. We need to have more car fires and R&D and research to actually figure out what isn't going to work and what is going to work. And it's really, firefighter safety and the public safety and the structure safety is something that we all have to try and piece together.
At the moment, it's very easy on paper, but not in practice. Yeah, definitely. And Jimmy, as well, coming to you. Are there any specific protocols or guidelines that firefighters should be aware of when dealing with EV fires, considering obviously what Brent said, the battery types and other unique components?
Yeah, Rebecca, there's a lot of things that really unpackage or packages up or frame it in such a way. There's many different things. If we look solely at EV vehicle fires here in the United States, this is a new trend or an emerging issue. Better yet, for departments to come up with a policy or some type of procedure to use in their department. I think what Brett said is that we need some more data. Data drives outcomes. We need more of these fires to really identify what is going to be a good practice. And again, and use what we've learned and apply it correctly into our procedures. A second point, when we look at EV fires in parking garages, kind of just segue what my brother Brent said. Not only is a smoke an issue, you get a cold day in a high-rise building, that smoke could be drawn into the building, so you're creating more problems than what it's worth for building occupants. That's a problem as well. But I look at it from the standpoint of concentrated live loads in parking garages. They usually do their charging stations in these parking garages all in one particular area. Just think about the gross weight of these vehicles. Brett had said they're about three times heavier than the cars that are non-electric. Just think of that load all in one area with the potential for collapse, because you're going to have extended burn time with these things. You're just not going to come in there and put these things out. There was a saying, bring about 30 to 40,000 gallons per minute, right, to the party to try to extinguish or quench some of these fires. And that's a lot of water, and that's a lot of weight as well. So that's something that we need to really think about, loading and collapse potential. Another thing that comes to mind too is that fire departments need to work together. Instead of reinventing the wheel, we have a very large network, right, between sharing information between other cities, other fire departments, municipalities, coming up with and identifying what are the best practices that you can use. Over time in the fire service, we like to reinvent the wheel, but sometimes the answers that you're looking for are shared or held by other departments. So it's very important to really just do an outreach. I know I talk with Brent a lot to collaborate on many things high-rise related, and then for Lyndon as well. You're just sharing that information, all right? That's going to help you fill the holes or the patches in your response policy. And then one more topic to talk about, and I know this has been a very, very big topic in New York City, is the presence or the fires with lithium-ion, or they call them e-mobility devices, which are those scooters. Those scooters and those guys are driving these things everywhere. Congested cities like New York and Chicago, you see a huge influx of these things. So what do? They bring them in their apartment. They fit easily in the elevators. They to their apartments, they charge them, and voila, you got some type of a fire going on over there. I know that the city of New York, the FDNY, is working diligently, and again through networking, kind of getting the overflow from them to identify best practices with these devices, but how to put them out. Now check this out. New York is keeping data, New York City, of their e-mobility device fires. And this is an astonishing number, is that they had hundreds of fires that are traced back to the charging of these e-mobility cycles or scooters inside multi-dwelling buildings. I think they had last year 83 to 87 fires, all right? But on top of that, another 5 to 7 deaths, which were attributed to these e-mobility fires. Which is just popping up. This is emerging stuff that's happening right now. And that's another thing that, departments need to address, have that built into their procedures. But again, the real big thing right now is just using the information and the networking and sharing it with other departments. That's going to be your best practice in a more proactive stance to dealing with these things.
I know over in the UK, they've banned the electric scooters for that very reason as well. So they can only be used in certain environments, or lithium-ion batteries can only be used, for example, in motorized wheelchairs, for example. And I know there's also, it's not just about how the technology we can use to put out the fires from a firefighting perspective, but also how we can detect them earlier. I did an interview earlier today with Honeywell, and they were speaking about early smoke detectors that can sense smoke before it's visible, specifically related to lithium-ion batteries. So getting that early warning preventative measures means that we can actually hopefully have more time to tackle it before it escalates. Like you said, if you have an electric scooter inside an apartment, it's not just an electric scooter fire, it's then an apartment fire and then a high-rise fire, so on and so forth. Yeah, it's interesting times that we live in. I think, like you said, collaboration and communication is key. Gerard, I see you've raised your hand as well. Have you wanted to hop in on that?
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in on the back of Jimmy, because I think he brings up some really good points there around tech blind spots. So we're at a really interesting phase in human existence where the technology is coming so quickly and it's outstripping our response ability. Like, we're turning up to these things and we don't understand them. We haven't had enough of them as a single brigade or fire department to go, yeah, we have all the answers to respond to this type of incident. So it is vital to have that network with FDNY who are doing a ton of work in that space, Chicago, Toronto, whoever's Western Canada, whoever's doing this work, we all need to share what we're doing in that space so that we can all learn from each other and gain experience. So there's an old quote, it's wise to learn from experience. It's wiser to learn from the experience of others. That way you don't have to make all the mistakes yourself. And I think when it comes to, especially these light vehicles, so we're having real trouble in my organisation with them at the moment because we're not so much in the response, we're able to put the fire out. It's then transporting the damaged battery from the 20th floor of a building to the street. And how are we going to do that safely? How are we going to do it in a ventilated space? How are we going to do it with no risk of explosion? Or are we sure that it's not off-gassing anymore? And it's very interesting to see that, like, we've got so many problems with these things because they're so new. So we're reaching out to our partners around the world to find out what they're doing so that we can probably piggyback off some of their experience, and FDNY being one of those. Yeah, but I thought Jimmy just brought up some great points. So I just want to jump in on the back of it.
No, definitely. And just something as well for, obviously, all of you have roles in differing fire departments, bar Geoff and Lyndon, obviously the same department, but every house is run differently. And how do you ensure the continuous training and updating of knowledge for your team, given the rapid advancements of EV technology? I'm going to go around the room here. So Brent, if I could start with you.
Yeah, as far as sharing information, when you ask for a panel of firefighters, and it's a international panel, I personally met all these firefighters. I've flown water with Geoff and Lyndon and Jimmy. I've toured Kent and London with Gerard. And it's not just the emails and sharing information, but it's getting face to face with these firefighters and, you know, having dinner with them, understanding their world, and sharing the information back and forth. Last week in Edmonton, or just outside Edmonton, sorry, Geoff and Lyndon, we were doing R&D and trying to flank attack high-rise fires, and we're using strange treatmenters, and we're using the floor below nozzle with a tether. So it's no longer the floor below nozzle. We can use different tactics, and we're working as a group. Even though we're so far spread out, we can Zoom, and with modern technology, start sharing our theories and actually making them best known practices. So the future looks bright, because when I first started my career, I only knew what we were doing in our city. I didn't know the scope outside. And now that we're evolving so quickly, a firefighter is a firefighter is a firefighter, no matter where you live in the world. And these are great friends. I can pick up a phone and talk to these guys as if they're with my own department, because we have the same interest. We're the same like-minded people. So it's a great group that we have here. And if it wasn't for them, I don't think I'd be as far ahead in my technology as firefighting if it wasn't for these firefighters on the panel.
Thank you, Brent. And Jimmy, if you want to come to you next.
Yeah, and I know Brent and everybody on the panel has been instrumental in the things that we do, the way that we look at high-rise firefighting, specifically in that role. All of us has had, I call it little spokes in the wheel. We all have a spoke and attached to the hub. And that's what it requires. Again, a lot of input, a lot of feedback, and a lot of the networking, which we discussed earlier. However, with high rises, and we look at them again solely from that standpoint, is that there's such low frequency events. Speaking for Chicago here, we will probably do 2 to 3 fires a month in a high-rise building, compared to the hundreds of single-family dwelling fires that will go on each month. So you can see the disparity. With the disparity, too, is that low frequency, is that sometimes you are not well skilled or tooled into that type of discipline. And I always say that high-rise firefighting it's a different animal. It's a different dynamic. And it requires, again, specialized training. I think we're all here doing that and trying to identify these ways, right? But we also wanted to look at, when we look at fire suppression opportunities and best ways to deal with these fires, we always have to think in our mind too is what is best for the building occupants. They are number one, they are first and foremost. So we build a process and a system that works around it. So building occupants, again, with number one, we've learned many important lessons learned here in Chicago, and matter of fact, throughout the nation, when it comes to safeguarding and protecting building occupants as well. So when we talk about low frequency, again, I just want to reiterate right now is that you need to share your experiences from other departments that have it, share what went good, but also most importantly, share what was bad, and using that to seek improvement.
Inspiring words, Jimmy. Thank you. And Gerard, over to you.
How do you follow these two, eh? I just want to echo what both of them have said. Like Brent, I'm so lucky to know so many people around the world, and they've all had such a big influence on me. Brent, Jimmy, guys from Western Canada, they're all great firefighters who have all influenced me in some way or another on my firefighting journey. The sharing of information is paramount, but we're lucky that we live in the information age. So I can jump on a Teams or a Zoom meeting with Brent. We can talk about what we're doing. We can go over a case study with Jimmy. I can share information with the Western Canadians at the drop of a button, and maybe a couple of messages to work out some time zone differences. So I think that's how we move forward together as an industry. I think we're moving into the era of the international firefighter. Traditionally in firefighting, there's been two schools, one being the North American, the other being the European, for want of better context. And I see those two schools coming together more and more as information keeps getting shared around, and we keep explaining what we're doing, how we're doing, and why we're doing things. So it's an interesting space to be in, and hopefully by the end of my career, we are seeing an international approach to mostly everything that we do as an industry. Yeah.
Thank you. And Lyndon, Geoff, no pressure. Anything else to add?
Sure, that and clean up here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think it's important to keep in mind that we don't necessarily have the answers, and I think where we're from, we're not seeing the frequency. When it comes to high-rise fires and EV fires, we're having them. They're occurring here, but the average firefighter is only going to a handful of those in their career, let alone on a daily basis. So we're really looking outside our fire department, talking with all kinds of people all over North America and less so the world for us, but it is our plan to do that. And just to learn as much as we possibly can. And there's a lot of learning happening right now. And FDNY has been great at sharing the information that they're seeing and that they're learning. So yeah, for us, it's all about learning and paying attention to what's happening outside our walls. So
yeah, it's an interesting time to be in right now, when typically the mindset of firefighters is the only thing they hate more than change is the way it was. And we need to kind of check our egos at the door and just embrace the fact that somebody out there knows the best way to do this. And the EV fires, this emerging kind of space, it's there's lots of options right now. Like you mentioned the discussion you had with Honeywell and the little piece of technology and stuff there. And there's going to be lots of things that need to be tried and some R&D that needs to be done, but we can get there, and the answer is out there, and we might already have the tool in the toolbox. Who knows? We just have to get out there and just kind of try it and be willing to accept different ideas. And that's where panel discussions like this and, attending a conference or just picking up the phone and all the folks here in places like this, they're totally open. They're open books, right? They post their contact information online. They're readily accessible. It doesn't matter if it's midnight or 1 a.m. now. They're still willing to have a discussion and just try and make everyone better.
Well, thank you, all of you. Lastly, I just want to finish on one final question directed to all of you. So we'll go around the room today again, but I'll start with you, guys, Geoff and Lyndon, this time. Over the course of your distinguished careers, is there any particular incident or trend that has most reshaped your perspective on firefighting? And where do you see the industry heading?
Sure, I can take that. I've been to several incidents over my career that had less than favorable outcomes. And post-incident, reflecting back on what happened and what we did, most of those could be attributed to us complicating things too much. Using tools incorrectly or putting our efforts towards methods that have since been proven ineffective. So what I've noticed in the last few years is that there's an industry move towards simplicity, using tools and skills that have been around for many decades, sometimes even back to the 1800s. Fire is really still the same beast it was back then. There are differences with the different types of fuel, but largely it's similar. So if we embrace the simplicity and truly understand how to use the most basic of tools, I think we can be more effective than ever. With the research and data that's being collected and the ability to share that information, we're understanding better and better how to do our job most effectively.
Thank you, Lyndon. And Geoff?
That's a similar trend I've noticed too, where we've really embraced these evidence-based best practices, and they're taking hold across our industry. It's an industry that's classically been divided for any number of reasons, such as, which coast you're on or which part of the country you're in, or if you're tucked in a little mountain hovel or something like that. Maybe even your big neighbor department, you kind of look to them for a lot of your influences and stuff. But in the age of the internet, all these barriers have come down, and we're actually drowning in information and opinions now. But lately, this giant murky pool of information is coalescing around these evidence-based best practices. There's tons of data and experiential knowledge to rely on, and it's been my experience that whether you're attending a conference or reading a book or taking in a podcast or something like that, the message is getting far more consistent and reliable.
Thank you, Geoff. And Gerard, coming your way next.
Yeah, echo what the boys said. It's very interesting. I think the incident that stood out for me was my first real high-rise fire in the central business district of Melbourne. I'd come from my previous experience before ending up in the central business district was a large regional centre of 100,000 people, moving into the outer suburbs, lower socioeconomic, a lot of fire duty, and then coming in the central business district on my first day in there, lunchtime. The tones went and turned out to an apartment on the 5th floor, issuing thick black smoke with a bit of orange flame. And I remember I was on the first arriving engine. I remember standing outside looking up going, this is so foreign to me. And I started to see all the complexities. And that probably kickstarted my journey into understanding the horror stuff. And I think the solutions don't have to be complex, echoing what the boys said. It's about finding the simplicity and the stuff that's tried and true, the stuff that's always worked, and applying it to the context that we have now. In the tall and complex environment, you get large and complex fire dynamics, but your tactics and strategies don't have to be that large and complex. And I know Brent and Jimmy personally do a lot of work around simplifying how we respond to these incidents. So yeah, that's probably what's kickstarted my journey and had the biggest influence. And it's a thing that drives me to try and understand and learn more and more about this environment throughout my career. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Gerard. And Jimmy?
Yeah, Rebecca, I wanted to add prior to 2003, and I'll talk about that here in a second. I had realized that we're very good, Chicago Fire Department, right, at putting out single-family dwelling homes, multi-dwelling homes, apartment buildings. We're really good at that stuff. Then I realized that we suck at high-rises. And I'm talking in 2003. The Cook County Fire Building in 69 West Washington Street, that fire happened in October 2003. That fire, which is again a landmark case study when it comes to high-rise firefighting, we had lost 6 civilians in the stairway. That was an operational oversight. It was perhaps something that we missed, and then 2003, we said this will never happen again in Chicago Fire Department or in the buildings here in Chicago. So we built up over the years, a very robust high-rise operational procedure, and it was the turning point. So sometimes I like to say it takes a tragedy to really instill change within your organization, and that holds true today. I had also talked about that we continue to tweak and look at our high-rise procedures upon every fire that we do, and to make sure that, man, is there something that we're missing, or what did we learn from this one, and inject it right into our current protocols as well. There is no better teacher than learning through experience or the experience of others, and identify that in your procedures. So for me personally speaking, being at that 69 West Washington Street fire, that was a real eye-opener to me. And it left me with the question in my mind, how could this happen? How could it happen? We found 6 people that were deceased in the stairway. So ever since that has been my catalyst, my forward thrust to continue to change and make improvements in our high-rise policy. And the department gives me that opportunity to teach high-rise within the department. And again, to make sure that things like this don't happen again.
Thank you, Jimmy. And last but not least, Brent, we come to you.
I see Jimmy and I have very similar stories, and for me it was the 2010 Wellesley Street fire, and I was on the high-rise unit for quite some time, and I thought I knew everything there was to know about high-rise firefighting. And if it ever happens to you in your career where you think you know it all, it's time to recheck and go to a conference and pick up a book, because when the 200 Wellesley Street fire hit us, it was my crew that got into trouble. It was my personal friends that had to be rescued by a rapid intervention team. And you know when you're in a building like 200 Wellesley Street, it's unprecedented, because it was a 8-hour high-rise building and it never got out of the room and contents. So we really struggled with that. And having been there, having lived that, having almost lost some close friends, it changed our fire department, and it kept me asking the questions, why couldn't this fire go out? Why did this happen? Why did this happen? And my research just exploded, and I started reading, and to date I've helped 83 other fire departments, all at donated time. We've hosted 34 other fire departments, thousands of hours, thousands of traveling. I'm going to be in Dubai, Singapore, and Kuala Lumpur next month. That's all on my own time, donated time, to get information to give to these guys so we can fact check it and we can truly change the fire service. Because 6 dead in Chicago, we had 6 dead in Toronto at Forest Laneway, another 6 dead in on the park. New York had 17 dead in the common areas. This isn't just a Canadian problem or U.S. problem. It's a world problem. Grenfell. And now that this is exploded into sharing information, we're going to catch up to the technology and the engineers, designers, and architects, just because of the type of people that you have on this panel. It's the passionate firefighters that are really going to change the fire service and start understanding how to better save these occupants. That's my take.
Well, no, very well said, all of you. Very inspiring words to end on, so thank you. And also thank you for participating in this year's Firefire Live. I really appreciate all your time. Gerard, I know it's nearing 1:30 in the morning, and for the rest of you, I know it's quite early hours in the morning as well. But thank you. This panel has been extremely insightful, engaging, and your knowledge of these topics is hugely impactful. And like I said, let's continue this conversation internationally and bridge that knowledge gap between departments. If anybody has any further questions or want to continue that conversation, please do reach out to our panelists directly, and you can do so on the platform and get to know each other a little bit more. Thank you all again. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.